the way in which you'd read the Bible. You've got the academic side and you've got the devotional side. And I think in terms of relevancy for the Bible, I would say because the Bible is still one of the best-selling books of all time, for those who are devotional to the Bible, it's still relevant. But academically, I think there has been a move away from...
is this suspending rational judgment then, for the sake of
sorry,
suspending rational judgment? Is that the devotional or not?
No, I don't necessarily think. I just think for someone who's a devotional Christian, I mean, I'm a devotional Christian, but I also study it academically, and I think as a devotional Christian, I'm quite happy to believe what Jesus said because I believe that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. But then, as an academic, I also understand that you need to be able to critique and understand the different viewpoints of the Bible. So I think the real argument here is that actually we've got a devotional and an academic argument.
Well, let's get on to the moral argument. I mean, you say there's bigger stuff than morals. I'll bring you in this next bit, okay? Because I want to kick off this is going to be, I think, the biggest section of our conversation this morning. Okay. The moral message from the Bible. And of course, Richard, in your books, you've been pretty scathing about the God of the Old Testament. Let me just quote you, if I may. The most unpleasant character in all fiction. Misogynistic, homophobic, racist, genocidal, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic. And you go on. It's quite a list that you...
I should have thought that was beyond dispute, but I would come on to the New Testament. What about the God of the New Testament? Here we have a God who wanted to forgive mankind its sins, including, by the way, the sin of Adam, who he presumably knew perfectly well never existed. Nevertheless, he wanted to forgive mankind's sins. Why didn't he just forgive them? Why was it necessary to have a human sacrifice, to have his son tortured and executed in order that the sins of mankind should be absolved? Is that not the most disgusting idea you ever heard? Why didn't he just forgive the sins? Why did he have to sacrifice a scapegoat?
I think this is Professor Dawkins has a view of cheap grace. A real forgiveness comes from restitution, from cost, from sacrifice. It is not God sacrificing his son. It is his son who, in obedience to the divine will, living the divine will in a society that has gone wrong, that is corporately wrong, which is what original sin means, by the way.
So there can be no forgiveness without...
Let me just finish. It is his obedience in the context of a corrupt society that leads to his death. That is his sacrifice, and it is that which restores what was broken between God and human beings.
So there can be no forgiveness without a death, is that
No,
right?
it's not. I'm not saying that. There can be no forgiveness without cost.
How can you applaud that? How can you applaud that?
Because it's true.
Well, not everyone applauded. Some people did, but some people applauded you.
Because there's multiplicity of voices, and that's fine.
And
Christina.
I don't think that what happened to Jesus was necessary from the divine's point of view, but perhaps it was necessary for what happened in the context at that time. And what we mustn't forget is that after the death came something that we believe is an unprecedented type of new life. Now, I can learn things about the universe from you, I can learn things about history from you, but one of the things that I find more engaging with the Bible and the stories it has in there is about the whys of the universe.
But what about the misogyny?
Why are we here? What is the meaning and purpose for our lives? And to me, what comes out very clearly in what Jesus taught and said, and certainly the writings afterwards, is the whole purpose is love. And I really think that we cannot get away from, and I know you cited that earlier story that was just that awful story from the Old Testament, but what the God I worship is a God of love.
And Richard, just to come back to you, what about the extraordinary things that Jesus said, that the Bishop Stephen was talking about earlier on? For example, love those who persecute you.
Oh, that's wonderful, of course. I mean, whoever said them, whether it was Jesus or not, whether there was...
Why should it not be Jesus?
Well, I don't care if it was Jesus.
Yeah,
it's a wonderful thing to have said.
I mean, why...
Jesus might have said, let him finish the sentence.
Jesus... whoever said it...
Why should he not?
Whoever said it, it was a wonderful thing to say, and of course you can cherry-pick any document and find lovely things to say. But how do you decide what to cherry-pick? You decide what to cherry-pick on the basis of what you have decided is a good thing on other criteria. So we reject the horrific story of Lot and the angels and all the other horrific stories in the Old Testament and the mega horrific story, as I've just said, of the New Testament. You pick on nice stories like the Sermon on the Mount. But the criterion by which you do your cherry-picking is, of course, something that we all share, which is we are decent human beings. That's where we get it from.
But I suppose
we reject those other aspects of the Bible, which are frankly horrible.
But in the same way, if you listen to the songs that you listen to on the radio are those that speak to you and speak to your heart. And in the same way, that's why you pick them, because they make sense and they speak to your heart and they move you. And that's why you cherry-pick those particular ones.
Of course.
Also, I don't want a hygienic life.
Yeah.
I don't want a life full of things that are just nice and just clean. There's lots that's messy and lots that's difficult that is in the canon and was kept in the canon. Yeah. And also the canon developed. So from a Jewish point of view, we continually developed how we see the Bible, so we continue to develop how we see God and how we see ourselves. So actually, I think there is truth in the messy, horrible stories as well.
That's right. Why? I don't think...
You look frustrated,
well,
Richard.
why bother with the Bible at all, then? I mean, you've got your nice messages that you can pick up from all sorts of places.
But life's not about life messages.
It's such a reservoir and a treasure house, and reading through it, I'm sure you relate to an awful lot of some of the...
Well, what about the stuff St. Paul said, Christina, about women, for example? I'm cherry-picking again, aren't I?
To the right person.
Submit to your husband as the Lord. It's a shame for women to speak in church. And it is, again, if necessarily...
I have to tell you,
you have to filter the good stuff out, don't you?
No, you don't have to filter the good stuff out. What you have to say is, who was St. Paul? What was his overriding message? What did he want to do? And he wanted nothing and no one to get in the way of people to have an encounter with the living Christ. Now, I love St. Paul. Those things he wrote, you have to do something that is called, in theological studies, hermeneutics. That is, what did the person who was writing then mean to the people he was writing for, and what would he be writing today?
Francesca,
what would his message be today?
This is proper historical study. Why did they write it?
I was going to say, you just made the point earlier that I do history and you do theology, but it seems to me, for you to support your own theology, you need history.
Of course, we need each other.
So why are we relying on a collection of texts that are thousands of years old from societies completely different from our own?
Because St. Paul is one of my favourite people, apart from the person of Jesus.
You wouldn't have been one of his by the sounds of things.
Pardon?
You wouldn't have been one of his favourite people by the sounds of things.
Absolutely. If St. Paul were alive today, speaking into our society, our culture, he would be completely different. And I'm sure he would
He'd want women bishops.
Absolutely, but that's the least of it.
Chris, would he want women bishops?
What he would want? What he would want is a restored relationship, joking aside about women bishops, which are between men and women, and he would want justice and he would want respect.
Dr. Les Henry,
what I think is really interesting about what's happened so far in the programme is, if we just take a step back and think about it, everything we're discussing is mediated through human beings. Yeah. We don't know how we got here. Science can't tell us how we got here. So the Christians will say it was by fiat through God. Scientists will say evolutionary processes, Big Bang, whatever. That's the one question we can never answer. But what I find very interesting is today is that you'll have one Christian will say something, another one will disagree, and then they agree, and then they move on. Then they disagree, and then they agree. And I find it interesting you use hermeneutics, and you spoke about St. Paul more or less justifying what he did, because the ends justifies the means. I think that's the bit you left out, but that was sort of where you were going. Now, I find it interesting that in the introduction to this programme, you can talk about Christianity used to free slaves. It was also used to enslave people like me. Hence William Henry. It's not African name. I'm an African person.
It was used to justify slavery as much as to free slaves, yeah.
It wasn't just used to justify, it was also used to control and enslave people. It was also used to control and enslave people all over the place, not just in Africa. And for me, what I find very disturbing about these kind of conversations, and cherry-picking is a very good word for me, is with many Orthodox Christians, they love to just use whatever justifies that point of the argument. But if you do point out the more unsavoury aspects of what is in that book, all of a sudden you cannot even dispute that, which is why I believe it was suggested that it has this privileged position. And why does the Bible have that?
Well, yeah.
I always, one of the things what I always say to people is, knowledge gives you the power